Welcome to Business Talk. And as the country celebrates the possibility of a fresh start with the government of national unity, the story of Capitec is instructive. That's if you believe, like I and most South Africans do, that turning the country's economic fortunes around, creating conditions for growth, and the hope and dignity of employment are really the most urgent priorities. And I was just doing a bit of digging. Capitec shares listed on the Johannesburg Securities Exchange back in 2002 at a shade over 1 rand. I think it was 1 rand 17 per share. The last time I checked, there were roughly 2,660 odd rand. So that equates to a staggering compound annual growth rate of almost 50% over 20 years. And it's a success story that offers some really interesting, but also quite clear and simple lessons on how to pull South Africa back from the brink, and one certainly that I hope future policymakers will take heed of. Well, my next guest has played an instrumental role in all of this. When Gerrie Fouries joined Capitec back in 2000, I think there were fewer than 10 people on the staff at the time, all of them founders. And now, Gerrie, welcome as CEO for over 10 years. You've really helped shape massively this chapter of growth that Capitec has enjoyed. So great to have you on the platform. Maybe you could just start by telling us a bit about your journey to becoming the CEO of Capitec.
Yeah, it's actually an interesting journey because when we started Capitec, Michiel contacted me and asked if I will join as MD or CEO. I was always actually more entrepreneur and not so much going for being CEO or MD or whatever. And we started and I accepted. It's actually a very long story, but I'm going to keep it short. We accepted, and about a week in my new role, you normally go and chat to all the people and understand where you're going. I was about to fly back to Joburg to go and fetch my family and coming down. And he asked me how's it going. And I said, Michiel, we need very strong people very, very quickly. And he said to me, the Platformbased Bank team is going to join us. And we have a meeting on Tuesday. And I said, that's wonderful. And so when I walked into the meeting, I was a little bit late looking for parking. The Platformbased team has already said they're going to join it. That's now Rian and Carl Fisher and Christian and those people. So I was probably the shortest CEO that you had because Rian immediately took over. He had much more experience than myself in banking. I was coming out of liquor, and interesting, 4 of us was actually coming out of liquor. And then we started, but it was just interesting. I've said it many times. For the first 6-7 months, we just writing the business plan, looking at the fundamentals. What are we going to focus? How are we going to execute? And if you look at the 24 years, that same recipe is still there. We still evaluate everything on those 4 fundamentals: affordability, accessibility, service, and simplicity. And then the work focus, and delivering on strategies is critical. I think that's where, it's interesting. If you look at ourselves and the other banks, the strategy is very similar: digitize, client service, those type of things comes to mind. But it's actually, how do you execute? And coming back to what you've spoken about South Africa, I think that's what we need. There's many plans, but it's how do you execute on those plans that really makes the difference.
Yeah, it's strategy execution, I think, is ultimately what takes something that can live in a document, as you say, that you wrote right up front as a detailed business plan, but then actually translate that into tangible growth, delivering excellence to your customers, which is clearly what you've done. And it all sounds so simple, but I think it's actually quite difficult to translate that and execute it with laser-like attention to detail and focus as well. You mentioned your background in the liquor industry. How do you think that shaped your approach to banking or understanding the client base in South Africa?
Yeah, we don't see ourselves as bankers. Bankers normally first look at risk and then client. We see ourselves as retailers, so first look at the client and then risk. But I think, being in the liquor industry, I spent quite a lot of time during that period in townships, in shebeens, seeing how we can open those channels. So we had a very good understanding of the total South African market and what the South African market needed. So I think that helped us quite a lot. In Capitec, we start basically every conversation with the client. What does the client need? Where are we going? I think it is what you talked about, the growth of us. I think that's where a lot of misconception is. that we started with the lower income or even in the rural areas. But when we wrote that business plan, we said we want to bank 95% of South Africans. So the only part of banking that we won't go for is complex estate duty planning, personal banking, all of those complex areas. So what is very simplistic, straightforward, those are the banking services that we're going to offer. And I think that's what we've been successful in the last 24 years, delivering on the needs of 22 million clients.
And obviously not into kind of merchant investment banking as well. We, focusing on the retail side. The importance of writing a detailed business plan. I mean, how did this discipline contribute to the bank's success? Because when you mention strategy execution, I often think of Robert Kaplan, who is at Harvard professor, and his balanced scorecard, and it's kind of in every MBA class in school. Do you follow that kind of approach where you measure performance against a balanced scorecard? How did that work in terms of building the internal discipline to execute on that strategy?
Well, if I look at our rhythm in a year, we start off in September with 2-3 day workshop looking at where the bank must be 5 years from now, 5 to 10 years from now. So we have that long-term view. Then October, we start pulling it back into what is critical for the next year. Then everyone starts busy starting with the whole business plans. And basically my whole November, December, I sign off on every single business plan in the business, going through it and debating it, have a robust debate and decide on priorities and sign that off. Then in February, it gets signed off by the board. And then we start with the year. We break the year up in 3-4 months periods. We've got a MOS, what we call our management operating system, where we measure very key items on our strategy and on our business plan weekly and monthly to make certain that we deliver. Your performance management is also done on a 4-monthly basis. And after each 4 months, we revisit the business plan and say, are we aligned? Has things changed, etc., etc. So that whole business plan, measuring the business plan, making certain it's executed is critical. And I think that the other very important part is we spend basically the whole of February and March, we spend sharing the plan, making certain that all our people are very clear on the different strategies and how it's going to impact that and what we're going to do. Because execution of strategy is you're not going to get it right if people don't understand the why. So a big portion of February and March is spent making certain that I've got numerous conferences, numerous work sessions, making certain our people fully understand what we want to deliver for this year.
It sounds very similar to what Rassie Erasmus also did when he took over the Springboks, hosting workshops with the players before they did any physical work or drills or anything like that, and just ensuring that all the players bought into the plan that he clearly had in place. And well, we've got 2 World Cup trophies to show for it, and Capitec has got the mantle of the fastest growing and largest now retail bank in the country to show for it. So clearly these things work. You've been the CEO of Capitec for a decade now, even though you mentioned that you're probably more of an entrepreneur, and often people think as a CEO as something more of an administrative role sometimes, with a bit of vision along with the chairman. How have you found being CEO of this bank, which does still strike me as a very entrepreneurial bank in its DNA, in its very core? When I think of Capitec, I certainly, and with no disrespect to the other so-called big 4 banks, because there's now really big 5, one gets a sense that it's far more grey-shoed and staid than what finds in the Capitec boardroom. So tell us a little bit more about that period as CEO and what stands out for you.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I joined the bank, I never actually wanted to become, or in my life, I never wanted to become a CEO. My passion was to be an entrepreneur and do something that, to create something, build businesses, grow businesses, enlarge businesses. And when Michiel asked me to join, he had this plan on how do we go into the retail business side and do banking completely differently, and that excited me. And I think that's just what we've done. So the DNA of the bank is where you need to take ownership. when I became CEO, I said we were getting bigger and bigger, and I said we need to keep that small company culture, and how do we get that right? And I said I don't want to be the CEO of everything, and we brought out every single person as a CEO, and the C stand for client, the E for energy, and the O for ownership. And we said, if you look at small businesses, that person owns that small businesses, does everything for the client. He's got very high energy. He doesn't say, what hours do we wait? I'm not working from 8 to 5. I take complete ownership of making certain my business is successful. And I think that's what we got right in Capitec, is to get that ownership from everyone, that energy from everyone, and to be different. And, my standard question is, if we bring a product out or we do something, how are you 20-30% better than the opposition? Because it's very difficult if your product range and your service are very, very similar. How do you differentiate? I remember we said service is going to be very important for us. Now, normally, if you ask anyone, they'd all say, any business leader would say service is important, but go and define service. We've gone in and said we bring in side-by-side consulting. So when our consultants work with the client and the consultant see the screen. So when you do affordability, the client sees he can afford it or he can't afford it. You put the client in control. Every screen is measured. Every step is measured. So I know when people go through a certain flow, on this flow, it should take 10 minutes. Here, it should take 5 minutes. So then I can measure that flow, and I know a total loan flow should, let's say, take 30 minutes. But if we're starting in 40, 50 minutes, then you understand that your consultants need to be trained. All our consultants, to make certain we deliver, has got certain criteria that they go through psychometric tests. They need to be a matric with maths, and they've got certain standardized training. So what I'm trying to emphasize is how do you measure things? How do you drive things? How do you do things? So it's that do things completely different. If I look at the life product that we brought out 2 weeks ago, it's 5-6 questions, and using all our data that we've got to go into that market and say, how do we do it completely different? And your application is done in 5-10 minutes. I think the other very important aspect is we've always gone in, and my philosophy was always, you get to 20% plus of market share before you move on to something else. So otherwise, you deliver a lot of products the whole time, but you're not dominating. And that brings a big discipline in, is to go in and make certain that you are dominant in that market share, and you focus on that product, and you optimize that product, you optimize that processes before you go on. Because the most difficult thing in life, to say yes is easy, but to say no, especially if you've got business opportunities or something else, is that ability to say no, so that you focus, you get to your 20-30% market share, and then we'll bring in something else. And I think that's been the Capitec recipe the right through, and I think that's why we do it.
It reminds me of what Andries van Heerden, the CEO of Afrimat, said to me. Often, he's a renowned deal maker in the mining sector, but he said, Michael, the most difficult deals are the ones I've said no to, the ones I've looked at, we've done due diligence on, we've invested time and a bit of capital as well. And then after all of that, so many people are tempted to go ahead, even though they may pick up something that's slightly off or slightly wrong. And he said, being really disciplined about saying no and choosing what to focus on, absolutely key. Now, earlier this year, the bank announced massive earnings growth, huge growth in its active client base and transaction volume. So just all the metrics that you measure so fastidiously through the bank heading in the right direction. Can you just unpack the results really, and what's driving that for you over the last 12 months?
Yeah, I think what has actually happened, I'm going back to 2017 in a strat session, we actually said, because we were we wanted to be a bank, and it was for us very important to build the bank brand. But we said we need to go and become more financial services company. And we slowly took the word bank away from our brand name to become Capitec, knowing that we will become a financial services division. And we started slowly working on it. And it's interesting, if you look at COVID, when COVID happened, that's what we realized, we need to have a complete gear change, because the world has changed, and we need to move massively into the digital space. and we invested seriously. I think a different way, also looking at, we've invested in the last 4 years about close to 6.8 billion on growing and developing our digital channels and other products in an economy that's struggling. So it's also having that different mindset to say things are tough, but you believe in what you're doing and you go for it. And out of that, we bought business banking, and we've replatformed business banking now to Capitec Business, where your pricing on retail and business banking is exactly the same. I think that's the first. I still don't understand why you pay different rates when you're a businessman and when you're a retail person, because the transaction cost is exactly the same. Then we've invested quite in the insurance business, having our own license and developing our own insurance product. And then the one I think that surprised the market was on what we call strategic initiative, or our value-added services, where we sell airtime, prepaid electricity. We've launched Connect, we've launched Capitec Pay, vouchers, Send Cash, and it's quite scary if you because you're sitting with that 22 million clients, you sit with 850, 860 branches. So you sit with this powerful distribution network, you sit with 11 million people on an app supporting that distribution network. You're sitting with the 22 million clients, and if you then go in and you launch a product to that 22 million clients and you really differentiate that product, you get a massive take-up. So just on our strategic initiatives or our VAS products, we picked up about R1 billion in extra profit coming through, creating value for our 22 million clients. So it's just thinking differently and do things differently, and then to scale it from there.
It's a powerful engine, and to your point, to scale it from there. But looking at the innovation and the technology disruption that you're doing, and I know Capitec is known for its willingness to disrupt itself. How did the decision to adopt a platform-based system, moving to AWS and Salesforce and other core platforms, really transform your IT operations and your ability to now do this at scale?
Michael, I think it's one of those interesting things, because when we started the bank, we were very proud that you got new systems, new processes, and you got no legacy. And everyone else is legacy. But I've realized in the last 4 years, 5 years, that IT is like a car. At the moment you buy a car, you may move it out of the shop. 6 months later, it's legacy, because there's a new product or something new coming out. And we were building everything ourselves, and we realized that by building everything yourself, you're just getting too slow, and you're spending all your time on building and maintaining your existing core system. And then we made a call and said, but no, we need to go and partner with the best. And that was AWS, Salesforce, SAP, Microsoft, these companies. And we've installed quite a lot of that over the last 4 or 5 years, and that's very quiet. SAP, normally you overspend and you don't do it in the time frame, and we've done it 100% in budget, on time, finishing, I think.
Not another spa.
No. But getting all of that in, because the nice thing now is our IT people, you can now update your core systems, like Salesforce. It's running all our BSC, our client call centers, etc., etc. You can update when they bring new updates or new processes coming in. But your IT people now can focus on delivering products and client service, etc. And I think that's helped us quite a lot.
When you look at all of this, you're still operating in a market that's challenging, and it's challenging for a number of reasons. South Africa, many of them obviously political, and there's a lot of hope for the government of national unity to unblock some of those bottlenecks and stop scoring some own goals. But what have been some of the biggest challenges that Capitec has faced or is currently facing in the South African market?
Yeah, I'm the optimist. I had one of those sayings that I said, go to Switzerland, everything works and there's no opportunities. Come to South Africa, there's not a lot working, but there's massive opportunities. Because if you think negatively, you're not going to see opportunities. If you think positively, you're going to see opportunities. And I believe there is opportunities. There's massive opportunities if we can get government delivering on what needs to be delivered, and government and private sector have got the trust together to work together to optimize the country. From a Capitec perspective, is what we're saying is we've got our own ecosystem of 22 million clients, and it'll probably be by half year result at 23 million clients because we're still growing with 150,000 clients per month. How do you make certain that you deliver to that ecosystem and making certain that you optimize that ecosystem? But then a big focus area for me is what we call the emerging markets, or the informal market, the township market. And that's why business bank for us is important, because if we can get those informal businesses to bank, and you can provide credit, and they can grow, and they can develop, and they can use the entrepreneurial spirit, I really believe we can unlock the potential in South Africa. And I think that must be a massive focus for everyone in South Africa, is how do you grow the entrepreneurial spirit in South Africa to get going and do things. And that's for us a focus, if we can help those businesses in those areas to unlock their potential.
That is fascinating. And I interview a lot of fintechs, alternative lenders, and they're starting to play in that space, because many of the traditional banks, they just don't bank what they call thin file customers. They don't know how to measure their credit risk profiles. And clearly you see an opportunity in that, and it must have something to do with data, I'm sure. But I want to fold this into one of our last questions that we have, Gerrie, and that's really your 5-year vision, because you mentioned that's how you start out with this. Where do we see ourselves in 5 years? So where do you see yourself in the next 5 years, come what'll be 2029, 2030? Where do you see the bank?
Well, I see, if you look at what we've got the retail client base and distribution network of our app and our branches. Then you've got business banking, and business banking goes to me all about the emerging markets, small businesses, medium-sized businesses. How do we support them, and how do we grow that? And then you've got your insurance business. We've only got 3 products now. How do you grow that? How do you develop that? And then you've got all your value-added products. So you bring that whole ecosystem, what we call the Capitec ecosystem. How do you grow that? Because we believe there's massive potential in that particular area. And then we've acquired Everfin, which is operating in 5 countries. And just for everyone, we're operating in Mexico, Spain, Poland, Czech, and Latvia. And it's an online lending business. And how do we grow that business? And if I look more 10 years, because I think it's the next 5 years, the focus will be on South Africa. But then how do you take Capitec brand international to any one of those areas, using the Everfin platform to start looking at international spaces? So I think there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of opportunity still. It's just coming back, focus, do the one thing at a time, and makes it, and you get that market share.
I can see why Cookie Kerman, who's one of the finest bank analysts in the country, is still so excited about Capitec, even though when I look at the growth, I'm like, well, how much growth can be left on the table, Cookie? He says, watch, wait, hold. Gerrie, I've got to ask you, and I'm sure you get this all the time in your interactions, from aspiring entrepreneurs who look at what you've done and what you've achieved. I'm sure that there's lots of advice that you could share, but what's the one kernel of advice that you would give to an aspiring entrepreneur looking to make a significant impact in their industries?
I think the one thing that made us very successful in Capitec is understanding the detail and understanding the client needs. You can understand the client needs, and then you need to deliver on those needs. But understand the detail of the organization, understanding what is really taking place, spending time in the branches, spending time. It's so easy to go into that mistake of I'm manager on a high level, and I don't understand really what is the devil is in the detail. Really understand that detail, because every cent counts, every minute counts. How do you optimize that? And as for me, a good example was I'm reading Elon Musk's latest book, but when he had to scale Tesla from 1,000 cars per day to 10,000, 12,000 cars per day, He went into the factory floor, he put his desk in the middle of the factory floor, and he went through every single process himself and optimized that within a 3-month period. That's what we do. If something doesn't work, you need to understand the detail to understand us. Don't leave it to other people. You need to understand the detail.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Gerrie Fouries, for sharing those insights and the detail with which you've approached building Capitec from very humble beginnings to becoming one of South Africa's largest banks. Truly inspiring, and we look forward to watching the journey as the vision grows and becomes even more international over the course of the next decade as well. Thanks for your time.
Pleasure.